I feel like I've gotten a little off course lately. Playing is an analytical series, sure, but also experiential. So let's dive into a genre I don't often play, hack and slashers. With a game that I sort of regret not playing earlier in life. One which I've now finished 4 times but haven't beaten once. Yeah, let's go with that. And it left me with some very mixed feelings. Since this genre isn't in my wheelhouse, we're going to game dungeon it a little. It felt right for a game with dungeon crawling. This video is me broadening my horizons, learning as I go. So today we're playing some incredibly obscure American jank. Amerijank? 2007's Depths of Peril by Soldak Entertainment. A game that may have broken my inbuilt disinterest in isometric hack and slashers. Sort of. Stick an asterisk to that sentence. I've always felt a weird disconnect with the isometric viewpoint, which, thinking back, may have come from Sonic 3D Blast, but I'm not sure. I know as a kid I played isometric titles besides that, and I know I've had fun with a hack and slasher at least once. But at some point something flipped in my brain and decided, you don't like this. It gave me a set of reasons why, and I've never really questioned it. I do this thing with food and drink occasionally, where if I don't like something, I'll maybe retry it once a year to see if my tastes have changed. I don't really do that with game genres, but today is an exception. The story of how I found this game is strange. My videos occasionally get posted on the Knockout forums, and being an old Facepunch user, I still watch the place. So I pop into the thread to say hello, and user Shake Shack asked me if I was implying I was going to cover Depths of Peril in another video. I had never even heard of it, so I did some research and, yeah, I had to play it for myself. I'll explain why in a moment, but I was sold on Soldak right away, astounded they hadn't come onto my radar sooner. So thank you, Shake Shack. Your confusion is to our benefit.
Okay, I guess there's also Depths of Peril, but that game.
I totally forgot about this until I was almost done writing this video. Maybe some wires got crossed? Anyway, my opinion on Depths of Peril is probably a smidgen higher than Ross's, but we'll see. First up, who are we playing? Well, we have 4 classes and they're all lacking in it. Warrior, Rogue, Mage, and Priest. The class descriptions are amazing. Each written in character, they not only sell themselves, they take potshots at the other classes. The Warrior implies that mages are drunkards, the Rogue says that muscles aren't everything, the Mage says he can't wear armor, but his magic is the best, so bottoms up. Then there's the Priest, and it could just be that she's above such petty sniping, but she comes off as so full of herself that it could be she just doesn't care about the others. Considering whenever I had one in my party they never healed me, I really don't want to give them the benefit of the doubt. I played as you. I know you can heal me. Anyway, I really like this take on class descriptions. They're all vying for my attention, and I get the feeling that none of these 4 are your standard heroes. We've got some good friction. I wound up giving each of them a go, so let's start where I did, with the warrior Stredge, a man who may not like the priest, but treats his body like a temple. Not a drop of drink or might of mana flows through him, just raw strength. Also, just like me, he's not very clever and doesn't know how things work. We start in our humble home. Hey, close the... Oh, we don't have one. Well, looking in is Hildigunn the tutor. She'll give us a treat from Siglio if we take her lessons. So let's get to learning. What follows is one of the most beat-by-beat tutorials I've ever seen. Equip your weapon, set up a hotkey, click on every object in the house. Not that this explains what they do, but it creates a pop-up that does. I ended this tutorial with a few question marks, but I'll explain this thing. This is our life stone. People can tie their souls to these, and if they die, they'll resurrect at their stone. This will drain it a little, but it recovers over time, and it can fix you up for free. The downside is that if it's destroyed, the souls of everyone tied to it are obliterated. You may be wondering why the hell we just have our phylactery sitting here like this when we don't even have a door to shut. Well, we're going to be dying a lot, and we can't have that slowing us down. If we're not back out the hole in seconds, we're wasting time. I find it funny that I have to talk to Hildigunn between each step, take a quest, accept it, fulfill it, and turn it in. I like to imagine Stredge just standing there listening to Hildigunn go on and on before she gets back on topic. Not a major complaint, but it's pretty clunky. Next, go talk to half the people in town. Then go talk to the other half. Well, they can at least explain themselves. We've got quest givers and vendors, pretty standard stuff. The town is a cluttered, ugly mess, but homely, in a way. I wouldn't say comfortable, but I've plenty of reasons why. Then, take a quest to get a quest. I took a quest to get this quest to get the quest, but it doesn't complete the quest. So I go and get a quest, turn in the quest, and then the tutorial's over. Alright, bye. I've never seen a tutorial that makes you do everything, yet explains basically nothing. I said I was learning as I go for this video, but that wasn't quite what I had in mind. In Soldak's later games, they cut tutorials completely. They even snipe a bit at this one, instead having a pop-up telling you to read the pop-ups and giving you an in-game guide. Before we get out there, you're probably wondering where the story is. Well, it's in my pocket. The game starts us with a tome and... that's a lot. It may come as a surprise, but this game is loaded with text. There are a ton of tomes. You can bring up descriptions for each of the monsters, and while not all of the lore is quite this long, this world, named Alaria, is incredibly storied, with many of the tomes and characters within them being the basis for games set in the same universe. Funnily enough, the one titled Depths of Peril is the basis for a different game, a prequel titled Kiwi's Underworld. I didn't play that one, I read how it ends. Necromancy is a common topic, and advancements in zombieism led to Zombicide, and the god Din has 2 games named for him. Now, I'm not the right person to judge if this is good fantasy. For the short time I was reading it, I did find myself saying, yep, this sure seems like fantasy, and then I stopped reading. It didn't grab me. The fact these lore books are random drops and won't exactly arrive in order means that it'd be a long time before I had a complete set. Luckily, most of them are up on Soldak's website. You don't need all of them, but that's why Section 1 is Barbarian required reading and they're all available. Still, even if you're not interested in the story, plopping tomes on your bookshelf gives a permanent stat buff, so they do still have value. Anyway, to cut a long backstory short, the forces of good and evil fought for 1,000 years. Evil won. But then the forces of evil realize they didn't actually like each other, and they've fallen into infighting so that one faction may reign supreme. Our story begins in the barbarian settlement of Jorvik, one of the last holdouts of the self-styled good guys. And with this blessing, this potentially final chance at bringing it back, the forces of good. Well, they're doing the exact same thing. Depths of Peril isn't a game about saving the world or leading the charge against evil. It's a game where we squabble with our neighbours for the right to do that. This is why each of the classes were bickering. It's preparing you for this. So evil is out there, but our competition is good. This is the feature that got me interested in Depths of Peril, and really Soldak's entire library. They make games taking place in dynamic, evolving worlds. Zombicide is a zombie survival game where you have to deal with other townships while weathering the zombie hordes and managing your survivors' needs, which seems to be the route survivalist White Strain is going. Din's Curse and Din's Legacy put you in randomized worlds that have randomized completion objectives, with quests that can evolve and get harder if left unchecked, eventually damaging the world around you, along with a mutation mechanic to add unpredictability to leveling. Drox Operative 1 and 2 are games where you play as an elite mercenary while the AI plays a 4X game in a randomized universe. So you go around taking jobs, playing favorites, and existing at the whims of galactic civilization as factions expand and develop. Each of their games have plenty of difficulty and world settings to tweak to your liking, or as I often did, throw as much as I can on random and just see what happens. And their dynamism, while janky and at the end of the day sort of rudimentary, is often really intriguing. These are games where you can really have an effect on the world, but it's changing with or without you. I love stuff like that. It comes with frustrations, but it can also be really rewarding, as it makes the changes you affect feel more earned, feel more real. And while Depths of Peril is on the earlier, more rudimentary end, and undeniably rough by rough standards, it gave me some good times and surprises. While each game in the Soldak library has its own flavour and focuses on different dynamic aspects, they are all built on the same skeleton. Their latest game, Drox Operative 2, has the same base as Depths of Peril despite a 13-year gap between them. This means a game that came out on my birthday in 2020 features a button to export your character sheet to a V-bulletin format. So to any forumites out there, Soldak is still representing. Depths of Peril's core gimmick is dealing with the other covenants in Jorvik. If you think your neighbours are bad, play this game. While the hordes of evil are at the... oh, we don't have a gate either. Well, while they're hanging around outside, our real enemies are within. And while I don't think we deserve to win, I want to. We achieve victory by allying all of the covenants, with a partial victory if we're not the strongest amongst them, or much more likely, by being the last one standing. We're barbarians, what are you gonna do? Stredge represents Knacker's Building Society. But that name was too long, so I have to tell you that BS stands for that. There are also a ton of other little dynamic events that can happen. The town can be hit by a plague, conditions can raise and lower shop prices, townsfolk and vendors can get kidnapped, killed, or worse. And as you level up, it feeds in more dangerous events like sieges and so on. The other covenants are AI players in the world. They're out there killing monsters, grabbing loot, buying goods, recruiting companions, making deals, and accruing power just like you. They can even finish quests if you're not quick enough. While I strongly suspect they're not really playing the game, an effort has been made to make it look like they are. Okay, bye. Essentially, the game doesn't sit still. There are slow stretches, but you can never be 100% sure it won't throw something weird at you. While the game is nice enough to pause the covenants while we did the tutorial, the moment it ends, that's the starting gun. We gotta move. Let's get this out of the way now. Yes, this game is ugly, but so is the nature of man. I grab some quests, go out hunting, and, I'm having fun. Going around killing monsters, grabbing loot, getting stronger. Like, yeah, kinesthetically, it isn't much, but it's doing the trick. They dialed that up in later games. Plus, I'm pretty sure that as far as hack and slash gameplay goes, this is far from top shelf, even by 2007 standards. But it's more engaging than I thought to go around smacking things, getting better at smacking things, and getting better stuff to smack things with. And the beatdown really doesn't stop. This game throws enemies at you. You need to hit level 10 for the game to upgrade you from an apprentice to an amateur, and you will have killed hundreds before then. There are some very high standards around here. Besides the common hordes to slaughter, there are also elite, champion, and unique enemies. Far tougher, but they drop good loot. So you gotta keep on your toes. And if these guys mingle with normal monsters, you're in for a tough fight. I also really appreciate that there is a ton of monster infighting. The backstory said that the forces of evil have turned on each other, and the gameplay delivers. Some species are not getting on. In one of my unrecorded runs, I took down a boss I was underleveled for when I chanced on them getting dogpiled and used it to my advantage. Here's why I told myself I wouldn't like this gameplay. When I run up against a wall in a game, I want to overcome it by getting better at it or figuring out a solution. I want my skills to sharpen as the challenge escalates, so that when I beat it, it was me that did it. Games where you get better gear to fight bigger numbers don't really appeal to me. It seems stagnant. Like, really, it's the same throughout, but with superficially bigger figures. I didn't get better at anything, my guy did. And plus the click on guy and watch a fight play out thing, that just seemed really uninvolved. If that sounds totally arbitrary and uninformed, it probably is. Positioning, good ability usage, inventory management, plotting out a character's growth, these are short and long-term skills. Hell, me getting a tough boss down by using the environment, that's far from stagnant. Plus, I've played plenty of games for reasons outside of skill. Yeah, I was really kicking ass at We the Revolution. Plus, it is hypocritical. I've played plenty of loot and level-based games. Hell, Dead Rising. That's a game where both you and the character grow, and I love that game. So it's probably just been some presentational thing. I'm not sure of all my own biases, but I find it odd that I had an excuse for this one. I mean, I don't much care for turn-based stuff, but I don't have some big explanation. I just prefer real time, and that's about as far as I understand why. When turn-based combat comes up on the channel, I just shift how I cover it accordingly. It's not worse, it's just not my jam. All of that said, I am here for the Covenant system. I am technically playing this in spite of it being a hack and slasher, and a lot of why I'm enjoying the combat is brought about by the tension Covenants bring to the game. This sort of time pressure isn't for everyone, but it means you have to consider each action in terms of how good of a use of your time it is. It heightens decision making. It makes each moment feel more valuable. Does this job pay well enough? Is it worth sticking around here looking and looting? I have to decide if this weapon is good, fast, and that's along with the fact that you have to identify gear in the first place. Will this companion give me a real edge? Okay, actually, it's always worth taking a companion if you have the space. They are a big boost. You can only have one active party member at a time, but your house has room for more and they'll stand in the way of the Lifestone. Actually, let me talk about the companions. They are handing over their soul to me for very little. Usually I just have to kill a handful of forest creatures and they're in. Hell, if I find them in the wild, I just need to ask. Now, this world is in pretty bad shape, and if you're an adventurer, you'll want insurance. but I still think they're being very lax with their own existence. There are spirits in this setting, but if your soul is tied to the lifestone and that's destroyed, does that totally obliterate you, or do you still get to be a ghost? I'd spend a lot of time weighing that up. Well, the answer might be in one of the tomes. And if you die, yes, you revive quick, but as it turns out, there's no way to get around death being a drag. You incur EXP debt which slows down leveling. In a normal game, that would be dull, but here, it hurts. Death is both costly and free. I valued not dying pretty heavily, but I also died a ton. It gives the whole game a sense of urgency and makes every action feel more meaningful. You're not just getting stronger for the sake of the next challenge, you have to stay competitive. Yeah, we're all out here slaying the forces of evil, but this is not a team effort. This is all about personal glory. It's also really clever. Quests can worsen. If monsters are left unchecked, they'll advance their forces. So more covenants does mean more problems, but they also solve others. But then that means they're stealing your glory. It also adds extra considerations to simple things like loot. The stuff that you're not equipping, well, you could sell it, or it could make a nice gift to keep yourself in the other faction's good graces. Or if the shops haven't got good gear in stock, well, you could always see what the other covenants have stashed. You'll have to haggle, but if you give them a good deal, or rip yourself off, they'll like you for it. Hell, they try to rip me off all the time. Speaking of money, this game is complicated, but what I love is that it's also as simple as you make it. Take the game's free currencies. You've got your standard coin for wheeling and dealing, then you have influence and crystals. You generate influence by doing anything, really. It represents how big a deal you're seen as and massively affects your power rating. It's perhaps the cheapest way of getting what you want out of diplomacy, but if you give away influence, you're also bigging up your rivals, so you've got to be careful with it. Influence also determines your crystal allowance from the town, and crystals are used at the Beastmaster to adopt guardians to protect your lifestone, and these creatures are taxed in crystals based on their level. Basically, there are tons of considerations in how you use your resources and social capital. But as Stredge, I barely understood any of this, and I still had fun and got places by just hitting things and learning as I went. You get more out of the game by playing savvy, kind of. But we're barbarians. Hitting things good is a reliable baseline. That's honestly my advice if you want to get into a game but think it's too complicated. Just play and use systems as they become relevant to you. Learn as you go and treat failure as entertainment in and of itself. My earliest runs of Crusader Kings, I had more fun flailing around and having a medieval drama pull me along. It's only in later runs as I was more comfortable with the basics that I got a bit more ambitious and experimental and picked up on the more obscure systems. Healing in this game is also really expensive. As in, early on quests might pay out 1 to 4 silver, and a single healing potion will take a lot of that. Food is cheaper, but it heals over time instead of right away, and it still costs a pretty penny. And before long, they take my nice cheap potions out of the healing pool and drop in really expensive ones. I missed my budget option. I was way too much of a skinflint, but it's worth keeping in mind that healing isn't just healing. It's more time out in the wild and thus more gainful trips. When downtime is lost time, it really changes how the game feels. This addition of chaos and pressure reverberates through every other mechanic, adding more considerations and conundrums. That said, one thing I and Stredge failed to realize for much too long was that every character has a gate, a tool to quickly set up a two-way teleport between home and wherever you are, that can be used at will, infinitely. Which is very useful when you can't trust a single one of your neighbours not to ransack your house. And, well, this thing's more than a little game-breaking, but honestly I appreciated the time save. I was playing Valheim with some friends the other day, and instinctively trying to trigger this thing to warp to town. It also excuses why the AI can teleport. This item may be covering for their shortcomings by making it seem diegetic. It's a nifty little item, that. As we know, this game was a little overwhelming at first. Long tutorial or not, it mostly tells you to do things, but without really explaining why you would, or to what end. For Stredge, this meant his story was a lot of angered confusion that no amount of dead forest creatures could really fix, mostly because his problems came from within the town of Jorvik. The Covenants you'll be up against are selected from a pool and all have different attitudes. The brutal slayers, for instance, aren't exactly looking to make friends. They get the first kill about an hour in, knocking off the kindred spirits. I wanted to stay and watch, But Stredge can't afford to waste time rubbernecking. I'm especially paranoid because I saw one of them leaving my house. Luckily, since nobody else liked them, the Guardians and the Keepers of the Faith teamed up and kicked shit out of them. Well, they didn't really team up, they were just both there at the same time. This is what happens when everyone hates you. Stredge got some companions to bulk up his numbers, but they couldn't really close the power gap, and he had no idea how much he could afford to give away to make the others like him. Eventually, the Keepers of the Faith, who clearly had none in Stredge, launched a raid. Yeah, it turns out I couldn't relax just because the Slayers were out of the picture. These guys weren't as aggressive, but that also meant they were smart enough to consolidate their power before turning it on others. I tried to fight them off, but it was a losing battle. If I kill them, they just come back thanks to their lifestone and they're dogpiling mine. So I threw in the towel and we survived. But their demand stripped us of crystals. Plus, watching back, no, this situation was not dire at all. But I thought it was. My brain was in panic mode because I was naive and had lost my first ever run to this situation. This time, I should have been able to weather it easily. But hey, Stredge didn't know that. I soon realized what had happened. Stredge hadn't been killed, but I had signed his death warrant. With so few resources left over, there's no recouping for the next raid. All I'd done is delay the inevitable. Benefit of companions, though. They're in the death cult for life. Best we can do is just get questing again. Jinna the Weapon Master got kidnapped. I tried to go on a quest to save her. That didn't work. The rescue quests are just such a roll of the dice. If the game spawns them in a monster mosh pit, it's all for nothing. You just get to turn up and watch them die. Turns out she's also tied to a lifestone, so, she's grand. Could use some of my time. I feel like the town just pulled a joke on me. Yeah, thanks guys, it's not like I'm in a bind here. I think it's at this point, though I'm sad to say it, dungeon diving often wound up more trouble than it's worth. They take way more time to navigate for not much more gain. If a quest was deep underground, it rarely turned out to be worth the trek unless there were no other jobs going. I picked a bad game to dungeon. Still, I did manage to pull myself up the power rankings, but I didn't really shore myself up before that happened. Yeah, they were not going to give me time to recover. The Keepers want to keep me down. So I'm screwed. I can't pay them off, and no one likes me enough that I could afford to sick them on the Keepers. And I can't even bully the weaker factions into helping me. Oh, I'll remember this, Guardians. You're not guarding much right now. So I say screw it and just bum rush their lifestone. That's it. That's my desperate strategy. Hope I can smash rocks faster than them. It's dicey. But luckily those people I tricked into coming round my house don't want to die about as much as I do. And well, have you ever read Ender's Game? Spoilers for a decades-old YA novel. In the book, the titular Ender realizes in the titular wargame he's in that while taking out the enemy team is helpful, the only basis for victory is getting through an opponent's gate. So while all of his rivals devise strategies to confront and immobilize enemies while minimizing casualties, Ender climbs to the top of the charts by sacrificing his soldiers, playing subversively and rushing the objective. And this works here as well. The enemy's stone is down. My desperate, half-baked, just hope they die faster than I do strategy works. And I'm sort of relieved and disappointed it was that simple. My dumbass charge toppled the strongest faction in Jorvik. Okay, it doesn't always work. You need a defensive line. In my short run as Smarmy the Priest, well, I played her as I imagined her, an above everyone else loner. I ignored companions and turned down every attempt at diplomacy my neighbours offered. I effectively roleplayed her to death. But here, Stredge sits at the top, on a mountain of influence and crystals. And here's the odd thing. Considering how fighty the factions are, I did want a diplomacy win. Mostly because it seemed harder, but we're not taking chances with these two. While it's unfair to blame them, Stredge knows they didn't have his back. I used what I gained to try and curry favour with them, which did well enough to make them not want to kill me, but I'm not exactly bringing them to the table. And before long... When this happened, I decided I wanted to take the win now, and my plan for doing so is both under and cack-handed. I rushed back to town, run to the Guardian's unprotected lifestone, and launch an attack. I hoped I could time it so they'd severely weaken the Sisterhood while I pummel them. Then I'd simply mop up the weakened Sisterhood. Well, the Guardians work fast. Yeah, they show me that, well, not the door. The story of Stredge is one of me figuring out the game, wrestling with the other factions, with a lot of fascination and some frustration along the way, but good frustration. Going around smashing stuff and not quite understanding what I was doing, just reacting as the world curveballed us. But I love the story of Stredge for this moment here, as two neighbours, apparently the best Jorvik has to offer, the two potential leaders for the last holdout of good in this ruined world, beat the fuck out of each other with hammers on their lawn, before realizing, no, this won't do. I need to obliterate him. The real depths of peril is being a citizen of Jorvik, and knowing that either of these two are your last hope. My garden is a fever pitch, my companions a ramshackle line of defense, as Stredge, in a heroic attempt to not die, death after death, barged into his neighbour's bungalow and started smashing his big crystal. It became a race. Who could hit harder and faster? I was a lowly level 9 apprentice, facing off against a powerful and dynamic level 11 amateur, but my companions held firm, and the day was ours. So at level 9, we win, and Jorvik has its ruler, a fledgling warrior who barely overcame the odds. He killed everyone else opposing the forces of evil, and now he's all that's left to face them. I'd say this world is in good hands, but I'd be lying. There are a few reasons I'd be telling porkies, but chief amongst them is that Stredge is leaving. When you clear a world, the game asks you to hit a button and set up the next, taking your levels, equipment, and companions with you to challenge covenants again in another reality. So over and over again, we win the right to take on evil, instead of taking on evil. This might make Depths of Peril the most vain game I've ever played. If you haven't gone for the Alliance ending, you're basically leaving the world rudderless. Some savior we are. Then in the next world you can skip cleared story quests because it turns out there were those, and take on the forces of good once more. Huh. I find it really weird there even are story quests, because, well, this game really feels like a play until you're done type game, where you quit when the core loop is no longer doing it for you. But the fact there is apparently a linear narrative in here messes with me, especially since I'd likely wind up tackling it over the course of several realities. We don't have to leave right away. We can stick around, do quests, level up, just play a hack and slasher. Though to be honest, I'd feel weird doing this, like I'm cheating the game somehow. I know that sounds ridiculous, but that's how my mind works. We're going to another world, but we're leaving Stredge behind. Instead, we're joining Sloane the Rogue, head of the Everything Covenant. Sorry, Hildy, gotta run. I know what I'm doing. Sort of. So how is the Rogue? Well, she's weaker than the Warrior, but on the plus side, she's better at running away. Okay, that's sort of unfair. The Rogue is a lot more limited combat-wise, and her gameplay is more complex, but she has far more versatility. But let's compare the energy bars of the Warrior and the Rogue. The Warrior had Rage. This bar starts empty, but as he hits things, he gets Rage, which he can spend to do his more powerful skills. It's cool. The longer you stay in combat, the more dangerous you get. I like this twist on the mana bar. The Rogue instead has Momentum. Certain skills are weaker than normal attacks or require specific setups, but they generate momentum, while other moves deal specialized damage or apply status effects but cost it. It takes a lot more attention and thought than the Warrior, who just has to hit things so he can hit things better. While I think momentum is a cool idea, it feels a little underpowered compared to every other class. The Rogue has to be intentionally weak for half of a fight to be capable in the other half. Meanwhile, everyone else is just good at stuff. And the Rogue isn't so much better when she has momentum that it really means much. She's just really outclassed. Oh, and the Rogue can throw down caltrops, trap check, though I didn't really bother since they never did much harm and I can simply walk back to heal anyway. And she can go invisible at will. This may sound pretty flabby in a game mostly about killing enemies, but let's talk about quest types. The Warrior and the Mage excel at kill quests, slaying beasts and beating bosses. The Rogue excels at exploration quests. Gathering items and scouting regions is far easier when you can pick your battles. and the priest excels at rescue and escorts since she has the easiest access to healing. For everyone else, jobs like that are a crapshoot. Oh god, the menu's blocking them. I can't move that! For the priest, she at least always has a chance in hell. And this is really cool. I love that each class winds up having quest types that they excel in. It makes them each feel that bit more distinct and specialised. There are a decent number of quest types, but repetition sets in pretty quick, and it is mostly weighted towards hunting monsters, killing groups of monsters, killing bosses, killing groups of bosses. And yes, invisibility does help with tracking down your quarry. It's easier to navigate the countryside if you don't have to kill everyone there. And while the rogue is incredibly capable by normal people standards, I mean, she's killed more monsters than I have and I'm from London, she is at a big disadvantage compared to the other classes. I can't depend on there being enough exploratory quests to pick up the slack. I gotta take what I can get, and what I gotta take is lives. There's no way around it. Hell, even a lot of the fetch quests require killing monsters to harvest parts off of them, and that's if those parts decide to drop, which they never do. The armorsmith needs skeleton skulls? I'm on board. Occasionally the vendors will have quests too. Nothing unique, but if you do them, they'll give you some gear. Well, they'll toss it on the floor and you can pick it up. Thanks. Simply put, I'm not sure Sloane could get away with Stredge's desperation strategy, and I feel like if I don't make an alliance, it's something of a bad ending. I'm going to engage in the town's politics a lot more this time around, both for survival and story reasons. This took a turn. I mean a turn. And a long time. The parties in play this time around are Sloane, who runs everything. Well, not really, that's the name of it, but maybe someday. The returning Guardians and Brutal Slayers, and the Treasure Hunters, who start in a comfortable lead. And we're off to a good start. The Treasure Hunters sent me 120 influence. While that is pretty much the medieval equivalent of a Twitter-like, consider me influenced. I'm trying to keep everyone off of my back, but my focus is on buttering them up first, and I know what they like. Actually, considering they're treasure hunters, maybe this is patronising? Well, whatever, it works. Turns out giving away loot is pretty much the way to go. It's here me and Sloane learn a frustrating lesson. The other factions are scum. Oh, you'll take and take and take, but the moment I suggest a trade route so we can make this official, you act all insulted. Granted, they would be stupid to accept this when they're getting plied with free stuff. Meanwhile, they try and sell me weapons Sloane's class can't even use. Sloane's story is one of desperately trying to save these idiots from themselves, thanklessly trying to get them to agree not to kill each other for no good reason. It took an hour of looting before the hunters were even willing to broker a tiny trade route. And, in a roundabout way, this does bring me to a problem with the game. And it's a petty one, since every other Soldak title has since solved it. This is a game where you're going to be holding Alt all of the time, so you can actually see what's on the ground. Later games made that a toggle. Hey, the Brutal Slayers are offering me some influence too. Oh no, they're just showing off. Well, I'm not too proud to take it. Even then, the treasure hunters do finally come to me with something. A non-aggression pact. All it costs is an utterly exorbitant fee. I figure I could hold out for a better deal. I then swing by their house and realise I'm not getting one. I think they sent that NAP to the wrong person. Oh god, the Brutal Slayers are really getting their own back for last time, and they've dragged me into this. It turns out Sloane can't pull a Stredge. She is not taking out that life stone. So I try a different tactic. I send the Guardians an offer, and despite the fact that if I'm gone, they're going next, they're not willing to let a sale pass them by. But they pull their weight, and between the two of us, we slay the Slayers. So, now it was just us two, and thus began my experimentation proper with the game's diplomacy. Let me just say that everything you've seen so far was from the first hour and a half of this game. Getting an alliance with the Guardians took another 4. It was an uphill battle. It's not so much that the other Covenants hate you, but they want to hate you. I get not making it too easy to get an alliance, but I'm plying them with goods every few minutes, and I'm pretty sure they're just tossing them in the trash. So it's also not just that they want to hate you, but they want you to hate them too. I basically wound up playing 4 hours of a hack and slasher where I surrendered my loot to a bunch of dickheads. And without the tension, the gameplay really starts losing its luster. The rush of keeping up is gone and is replaced with a treadmill. As Sloane, I wound up killing more monsters than Stredge and cured the plague. Twice. So let's go over some other problems. The world map. Each game has semi-randomized regions, and they are all squares. This is very rudimentary world generation. Again, Soldak got way better at it later on. These areas don't have much in the way of elevation, decoration, or landmarks. They're just big open fields filled with monsters. And finding your objectives in here is just combing these maps over and over again, hoping to find pickups, monsters, and bosses, usually after wandering for minutes at a time. This brings me to Turin. This guy had 2 bounties on his head. Problem is, each one put him in a different region. Something that's cool about this game is you don't need to have a quest for the objectives to exist. You can just stumble across them since, well, other factions may be gunning for them too. Downside in this specific case, this does mean they are sort of persistent. And now with Turin, he can be in one of 2 places. One of these 2 quest descriptions is false. Though I'll cut the guy who got it wrong some slack. He's grieving. Regardless, I spent a long time looking in the wrong place, and when I found Turin, I was not ready. He is a massive step up in difficulty. I almost got him on the first run-in, but I think I backed off just as he activated his non-stop health regen, and then he started shedding undead like a snake sheds its skin. I struggled to even get near him after this. I blew my one shot to take him down, and that wasn't easy to begin with. The monster spam is another issue, especially around gates and dungeon entrances. The game can just decide, nope, you're screwed, in a second. This gets bad when you have a boss fight and they're hanging out in a mosh pit. Turin brought his own posse, but honestly every creature in the Wildwood Forest wants in on the action. It went from something I enjoyed to walking through ankle-deep mud, just killing monsters non-stop. Though I should praise some monsters I like. I like the giant bipedal bears, and as the game goes on we fight organic monsters spawning portals and seemingly living towers. Plus, you can't go wrong with a giant skeleton. And well, these are just skeletons too, but they're called Bone Lords. And then there's the biggest enemy of all, the pathfinding. Yeah, I still haven't quite bridged that gap. I still feel that isometric disconnect, and in high-intensity situations, it felt like the character and I had different ideas about where we should run. Let's talk about the music. And that's basically all I remember. The game is so cacophonous and the music's so dull, I had to struggle to remember that music did indeed play, and I just noticed these first few notes. There is more music, it's just all gone. We also have companions. In a party they're sort of stupid, but they run distraction well enough. I hoped I could kite bosses while my buddy Toasty made them toasty, but they'd sooner toss their life away. Priests never healed me, and about the only companions that do well are warriors, because, well, if you're going to be too stupid to run away, you can at least be sturdy enough to stand your ground. Granted, Sloane didn't want warriors. Muscles aren't everything, mate. Get out of here. I severed him from the Lifestone. I should have realized that would happen. This all said, sometimes when I died, the AI would freak out. So stuff like this would happen. Tactical death. I bring companions up because I did make some headway with the Guardians during all of this. Not much, I can't even get them to agree to a tiny trade route. But then I asked them if they'd like to adventure together. And well, I accept their extortionate terms. And look at what happens. Great. By fulfilling quests and slaying monsters together, our bond should grow stronger. Unfortunately, companions have a nasty habit of dying. If it was Toasty, this would just cost me some Lifestone energy and that'll come back. But this is tanking what bit of progress I had made. I wound up kicking Air out before long. The moral is, if you're going to get people to die for you, find ones who won't hold a grudge. But yeah, from here on out it was some very bog-standard questing to rebuild power, giving away everything I didn't want to patch up our relationship, and all the momentum of the game had died with the Slayers. Eventually, when I had a 3-level advantage on the guy, Sloane and Toasty finally managed to best Turin. That's about as much of a climax as we're going to get, because really, after giving away enough weapons to arm a small country and me winning my influence back, I just sort of get the alliance. Yeah, at some point they were alright conceding to that. So, you either get a bombastic bad ending, at least in my mind, or an optimistic yet boring one. So, that's the story of Sloane, the rogue who tried to hold things together, but was dealing with a town of violent blowhards. I did have fun in this playthrough, but there were long stretches of nothing much happening. Turns out the game really just can't relentlessly curveball you. And building relations with other factions feels Sisyphean and unrewarding. Still, Sloane, frustrated as she must have been, did win in the end, and can now leave that universe in the Guardian's hands. Well, best of luck. The third and final universe we're seeing today is with the Mage Sop of the Sips faction. Let's sum up the Mage with his first encounter with Turin. Sop was 3 levels lower than Sloane when she struggled to kill the guy. Sop mops the floor with everything. He's an absolute powerhouse. He's got a beating stick, fire, ice, lightning, and I really like the icon for concentration. Hello. The downside is meant to be that he has a traditional mana bar that drains down and needs to be refilled with potions or pints. But what proof is the Lifestone? Basically, the mage has no downsides. I guess he's fragile, but so is the rogue, and unlike her, he can kill things from a distance. He can even cast while running. Bigger ain't slowing him down. Since we're on a magic class, let's just cover the priest quickly. Smarmy, as we know, didn't do so well, but her class is pretty powerful. A mix between warrior and mage, and the only one with free access to healing. That goes a long way. Plus, she's still a very viable damage dealer, so it's not like you get a crap composite of 2 classes. You do actually get a decent warrior-mage combo with incredible survivability. It's kind of wild. Like the mage, they have a standard draining mana bar, but this one refills over time and can also be sped up with the Lifestone. They're obviously not quite good enough to go it alone, but hey, who is? She may walk in the light, but she dies in the shadow of those smart enough to team up. I will say, every class felt different to play and none of them were outright bad. I went in with way lower expectations than that and got shown up for it. Later games in Soldak's library, well, if I ever cover one of these, I am not going to be able to tackle every class. Overall though, this game favours the mage. He's a nuke. So Sop should be laughing. But I actually feel bad for the guy. Alcohol doesn't really enter the picture until a few levels in, so he couldn't even get his drink on. Apologies to the artist. And if I was Sop, I would want to be drinking. I think the other factions feared his power, and as such, he got relentlessly bullied throughout his playthrough. This was despite trying his damnedest to pull off the biggest magic trick of all, an alliance with more than 2 surviving covenants. It was in this playthrough and Smarmies that I started to realise the larger problems of the covenant system that enticed me in the first place. I want to state that I do like this game, but by now in a way that I like the Foundation and really just want to see it done better. Soldak have done 2 direct sequels. I'd like to see their original title get that treatment. The first hour of play is by far and away the most exciting. The power rankings are in constant flux, you get to see everyone else out roaming the wilds, it's a race to get quests in, establish yourself, and see where all the pieces fall, and it can be pretty exhilarating. The problem is, the more proactive factions who add some excitement into the mix are all bastards, and will get themselves killed by the less rash, less forceful covenants, leading to a slow-paced and uneventful mid-game. And after the appeal of wrecking wildlife goes, well, you're not left with much. This does bring me to another issue with this game, and that's of pacing. Now, I won 3 out of 4 of the games I played. These characters ended up at level 10 of 100. That's some weird pacing. It's incredibly fast on the micro scale and glacial on the macro. Still, I did do second runs as each of these characters, and it got a bit less interesting. Factions became too powerful to kill each other unless they really rushed into conflict, so it was mostly them fruitlessly butting heads over and over again. I guess that makes alliance endings easier. So, the first hour saw the demise of the Gilded Coin and the Shadow League, leaving us with the Treasure Hunters in the lead, followed by Sips, then the Guardians, with the Brotherhood trailing in last. Wait, the Brotherhood of Steel? I had no idea Fallout took place in the world of Valeria. Now to just place it on the timeline. I did feel like I was getting better at the game by now. I knew what to prioritize and could comfortably keep multiple factions off my back. What I couldn't do was stop them from shoveling dirt in my face. I give and I give and I give. Then I see that one of them has gone and spread a rumour about me. Rumours cost crystals to spread and tank the influence of the target covenant. So yeah, people in town aren't playing nice. At least the Slayers had it in them to be direct. But no one wants to mess with a mage. They know this doesn't truly represent my power. But this didn't just happen because of rumours. I made some mistakes. But they were not unprompted. Something seemingly miraculous happened. The Gilded Coin prior to their demise, and later the Treasure Hunters, had come to me offering trade routes. All it took was me bankrupting myself. I'm unsure if the AI is moronic or Machiavellian since, well, trade routes cost crystal to maintain. So when I was stupid enough to accept the deal for the sake of the relationship boost, all I had done was doom myself to fail while handing over a ton of resources that I would have needed to maintain that route. So they get everything, and I look bad when the deal falls through. I may be a magician, but they just pulled a real disappearing act. Now that was on me, but it does bring us to my final issue with the Covenant system. And that's that while I do have decent options for how I can sort myself with the other Covenants, I have only the most basic options for how they interact with each other. I can't try to make them like each other more or avoid certain behaviours. I can't really manipulate proceedings. This is especially frustrating as the Covenant system seems rigged to descend into conflict. The only variable, faction to faction, was how soon does it happen. I never saw them form protection pacts or trade routes of their own, which would add unpredictability and dynamism to proceedings. The faction system lacks the unpredictability I hoped for. It only works before you've seen it a few times. It took Sloane 4 hours to appease one faction. I wanted to save 3. And I inevitably failed. Stuck between these two, when the battle inevitably started, I considered my options. And looking at it, we all know the right thing to do. I have no idea how much peace would have costed, but I'm not paying up. They've bled me enough already. Now they get to bleed. I outstretch Stredge by easily taking down the Treasure Hunters. Then when the game gives that win and resulting resources to the Brotherhood, I spread rumours to topple their newfound lead and pull them into an alliance. Sop couldn't find a drink in this town, but in the end he got to taste their tears. I failed in my goal of having more than 2 surviving Covenants, but they got what they deserved. The moral of the story is that you can't save them all. And before you feel guilty about that, first ask yourself, were they worth saving? The answer may be darker than you think. Novelty is a double-edged sword, and the issue and draw of Depths of Peril is that I adore its concept, but am left underwhelmed with how it plays out. When I completed Stredge's playthrough, I had an adoration for the game. I enjoyed what my confusion led to as I fought against the tide, but perhaps paradoxically, it made me want to understand the game better, and the more I put in, the less I got out. Which is a shame since the concept is great. Medieval politicking where you play as a hero trying to save the last bastion of good, competing with other heroes who have conflicting ideas of who should be the one in charge. You apply that concept to a freeform RPG with systems for diplomacy, and my mind races at what might happen. I'd love to see this idea realised more thoroughly because there's a ton of scenarios that could organically crop up from it. So many potential sources of overlapping tension and approaches in how the player tackles that tension. Throw in systems to expand the town, maybe recruit wanderers to add vendors and townfolk, maybe even pull from the forces of evil who could make powerful allies but sow distrust with others. Add in more ways to subvert and toy with your neighbours, and you've got a really fascinating and dynamic RPG where each playthrough can pull you in new directions. Hey, maybe we could have trade routes where you actually have things to trade. I praised the free resource types, but this game has too many systems but not enough interaction and resources to make them all meaningful. Still, I'm just letting my imagination run away with me. This was a 2007 3D indie RPG hack and slasher developed by one person, with a bit of contracting here and there. This one person was an industry veteran, sure, but no doubt working out of pocket. In a genre they clearly cared a lot about, but were wise enough to approach with a measured ambition. They've created an ongoing fantasy universe with not only a mountain of lore, but lore which has actually been used as a base for other games within it. Soldak is a really fascinating studio. It's been there for so long that even I, someone who tries to find obscure games with unique premises, hadn't even heard of them until an absurdly unlikely potential crossing of wires brought them to my attention. There's so many absolutely fascinating and unique games out there that I'll probably never have the luck to stumble into. Having a YouTube channel to document my experiences with games is great because, well, it's eased the burden. Other people want to share their odd finds and send me down new and exciting rabbit holes. Award time! Worst Neighbours. Jorvik is a hive and the people are awful. If this is the last bit of good in the world, let it burn. Gateway Drag. This was a game good enough to make me realise I don't have to dislike this genre, but not good enough for me to really recommend this game on its own merits unless you really need a hack and slasher with some bells and whistles, or are otherwise just really drawn to this concept. And lastly, needs expansion. The concept is fantastic, but it doesn't feel anywhere near fully realised. None of Soldak's other games quite pursue this idea again. Remnants of it remain, but they're taken in new directions. And from what I've read, most of their games inspire this sort of feeling in others. Good concept, but it always needs a little bit more. They're providing concepts and experimenting with dynamic, evolving worlds. Maybe it falls to other people to take these ideas and really run with them. So that's the episode. It was fun to dip my toes into a new genre. I can say that I don't arbitrarily dislike hack and slashers anymore, though I wouldn't exactly call myself a convert. If you want to support the channel, please spread this video around. If you want to support me more directly, I have a Patreon filled with the lovely people scrolling past. Everyone gets access to a Discord server, and for more you get access to scripts and notes, and at $5 access to afterthought videos where I answer viewer questions about the video, throwing in any last second thoughts. Have a good night, and remember, if you have a phylactery, you can afford to put it somewhere safe. Dying will always slow you down. It just can't be helped. Well, for all of my complaints, at least the game doesn't have elves.